Reginald Ashford was 45 years old, and for 6 years he'd let the world believe he was barely scraping by. He drove an old truck, wore plain clothes, let his own wife call him small-time. What Camille didn't know was that Reg secretly owned a company worth tens of millions of dollars, hidden behind a name she'd never think to question. That Tuesday evening, he came home early and heard her laughing on speakerphone in the kitchen, bragging to her sister, saying she'd finally landed a rich man, said he was about to make director, said Reg wouldn't know real money if it slapped him. Reg stood frozen in the hallway, unseen, listening to his wife mock the very fortune she was living inside of. He didn't know the man's name yet, but he was about to find out exactly who he was, and exactly how close that man already was to him. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee maker beeped at 6:14 a.m., same as always. Reg stood at the kitchen counter in a plain gray t-shirt and dark work pants, both clean but nothing special. His boots were near the door, already tied the night before. A habit. He didn't like wasted motion in the morning. He liked quiet. He liked the 12 minutes between the first cup of coffee and the rest of the day, when the house was still and the world hadn't started pulling at him yet. He was a big man, wide shoulders, careful hands, the kind of face that looked like it had seen a lot and decided not to say much about it. 45 years old and built like someone who had carried heavy things for a long time, not just boxes or equipment, but decisions, responsibility, the kind of weight that doesn't show up in a photograph. He poured his coffee and stood by the window. The backyard was quiet. The grass needed cutting along the back fence. He made a mental note, then immediately remembered that he'd been making that same mental note for 3 weeks. He almost smiled at that. His phone buzzed on the counter. He turned it over without rushing. It was a message from Priscilla Okafor, his COO, the one person on Earth who knew exactly what Reg had built and what it was worth. The message read, "Hartwell contract finalized. Wire confirmed. 9 figures. Call me when you're ready." He stared at the screen for a moment. 9 figures. He set the phone face down and took a sip of coffee. Camille came downstairs at 6:40, already dressed like she was going somewhere that mattered. Silk blouse, dark slacks, heels that clicked against the hardwood with a sharp, impatient sound. Her hair was done. Her makeup was perfect. She looked the way she always looked, put together and slightly out of reach, like a woman performing a version of herself for an audience Reg couldn't see. She went straight to the refrigerator without looking at him. "There's no oat milk," she said. "There's regular milk," Reg said. She closed the refrigerator. "I know there's regular milk, Reg." That was the end of that conversation. He watched her move around the kitchen, and that's when he noticed it. On her right wrist. A bracelet he had never seen before, thin gold, delicate, with a small charm hanging from the center. It wasn't something she'd had last week. He was certain of that. He noticed things. It was one of his few vanities, the quiet pride he took in paying attention. He didn't say anything about it. Camille poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter across from him, scrolling her phone with one hand. Then her screen lit up. She tilted it toward her chest in one smooth motion, fast, but not fast enough to be invisible. Reg caught a single letter at the top of the notification before it disappeared. D. Camille set the phone face down on the counter and looked up at him, her expression flat and easy, like nothing had happened. "Marcus got a bonus this quarter," she said, referring to her sister's husband. "Denise said they're doing a trip to Portugal in the fall." "That's good for them," Reg said. Camille looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who keeps giving the wrong answer. Patient on the surface, tired underneath. "He's been with that firm for 3 years, Reg. 3 years, and he's already a senior partner. I'm just saying. She picked up her bag from the chair. Some men know how to move up. She left the kitchen. A minute later, he heard the front door close. Reg stood there, finished his coffee, rinsed the mug. He thought about the bracelet. He thought about the letter D. Then he picked up his phone and typed back to Pris. Good. I'll call at 8. He got home early that evening. He'd meant to stay at the office. There was always more to do. But something pulled him back. He couldn't name it. He just drove home instead of staying. And he let himself in through the side door that led through the utility room, the one that didn't make noise. He heard her voice before he reached the hallway. Camille was in the kitchen. The call was on speakerphone, loud enough that her sister's laughter came through in bursts. Reg stopped just past the doorway, still in the shadow of the hall. He didn't move. Girl, he is not like that, Camille was saying, her voice bright and loose in a way Reg hadn't heard in years. He is fine, and he has money. Not comfortable, not doing all right. I mean, rich. This man dropped $800 on dinner without even looking at the bill. Her sister said something. Camille laughed. Reg? She laughed again, harder this time. Reg wouldn't know real money if it walked up and slapped him in the face. He's married to that little company of his, and that's about all he's got going. Reg stood very still in the dark hallway. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He just listened. Reg waited until he heard the bedroom door close upstairs. Then he sat down. His home office was small and plain. A wooden desk, a rolling chair, 2 metal filing cabinets against the wall, a lamp with a warm yellow bulb. No decorations, no framed certificates or awards. The one window looked out at the driveway, and the porch light cast a long, pale square across the floor. He sat with both hands flat on the desk and said nothing for a long time. Reg wouldn't know real money if it walked up and slapped him in the face. Her voice came back to him easily, too easily, like it had already found a place to live inside his head. He thought about the bracelet, the gold one, thin and delicate, sitting on her wrist like it had always been there. He thought about the way she had tilted her phone toward her chest when that notification came through. One letter, D. Fast and smooth, the way a person moves when the motion has become second nature. She had been practicing that move for a while. He thought about her voice on that call. Bright, loose, alive in a way it hadn't been around him in longer than he wanted to count. She laughed like she meant it. Like something in her life had gotten good again. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He was not a man who broke things. He had never been. His father used to say that a man who loses his temper has already lost the argument. And Reg had taken that further. He believed a man who acts too fast gives up his advantage for free. Anger was information. It told you something important. But it was a bad driver. So he sat with it. He's about to make regional director. That detail had snagged him the moment she said it. More than the rest. More than the money talk, and more than the laughter at his expense. A regional director. That was a specific thing. A title. A level. It meant a company, a structure, a promotion that somebody had to approve. He turned that over in his mind for a while. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a plain yellow notepad. He wrote 3 things down in his careful, even handwriting. Regional director. Pending promotion. Name starts with D. She said, about to make. He studied what he had written. About to make meant it hadn't happened yet. It meant the promotion was still in progress somewhere, in some organization, on somebody's desk, waiting for a signature. He tapped the pen against the edge of the notepad once. Then he closed it, put it back in the drawer, and turned off the lamp. He didn't sleep much. He lay in the dark on his side of the bed and listened to Camille breathe, and he thought about patience, about what it cost and what it bought. She had no idea he had been standing in that hallway. She had no idea he knew anything at all. That gap between what she knew and what he knew, that was something. He didn't know exactly what yet, but it was something. He was up before 5. Meridian Ops Solutions occupied the 3rd floor of a plain office building on the east side of the city. The building had no signage on the outside that mentioned Ashford anything. That was deliberate. Reg had chosen the name Meridian specifically because it was forgettable, functional, the kind of name that made people think of shipping manifests and route coordination, not 9-figure contracts and equity holdings. He liked it that way. Pris was already at her desk when he arrived at 7:15. She had a coffee in one hand and a printed report in the other, and she looked up at him the way she always did, assessing, quick, and then settling into something steady. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I slept fine," Reg said. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but she let it go. That was one of the things he valued most about Pris. She knew when to press and when to move on. He closed the office door behind him and sat down across from her. "I need you to pull something for me," he said, quietly. She set the report down and folded her hands, listening. "Go through the personnel records. Anyone currently up for a regional director promotion, active candidates, anyone who's been flagged or recommended in the last review cycle." He paused. Young. Probably late 20s, early 30s, likely in account management or regional ops. Pris didn't write anything down. She held his eyes instead. "Any other details?" "That's all I have right now." She studied him for just a moment. He could see her turning something over behind her eyes. She was smart enough to know there was more to this than he was saying. She was also smart enough not to ask. "I'll have a list for you before noon," she said. "Keep it between us," Reg said. Pris nodded once. "Always." He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and picked up the Hartwell file from her desk. The morning had started. Pris came back at 11:47. Reg heard her knock once, 2 short taps, the way she always did when the matter was private, and he called her in without looking up from the logistics report on his desk. She closed the door behind her. She had a single printed page in her hand, face down. "One name," she said. "Fits everything you gave me." She set the page on his desk and turned it over. Reg looked at it. Deshawn Price, 29 years old. Regional account manager, hired 8 months ago out of a mid-size freight brokerage in Atlanta. Strong first-year numbers. Good client retention. Flagged for the director track by his regional supervisor after the 3rd quarter review. The formal promotion recommendation was sitting in the pipeline, waiting on final approval from Pris's level before it came to Reg. There was a small HR photo in the top right corner of the page. Reg looked at it for a long moment. Deshawn Price was young. That was the first thing. Young in a way that felt almost startling. Bright eyes, easy smile. The kind of face that had probably never had to work too hard to get a room to like it. He was well dressed in the photo, even for a standard ID picture. Collar crisp, jaw clean. The kind of man who understood that how you looked was part of how you moved through the world. Reg studied the photo and felt something he hadn't expected. Not rage, not even jealousy exactly. It was something quieter than that, something that settled in his chest, like cold water. Because the man in that photo was unremarkable. Talented, maybe. Ambitious, sure. But unremarkable. He was just a young man on the way up, doing what young men on the way up do. Reaching for the next thing, the next title, the next thrill, without stopping to check who was in the way. The problem was what that said about Camille. Not about Deshawn. About her. "He's been with us 8 months, Reg said. It wasn't a question. 8 months and 4 days, Pris said. His supervisor put him up for review about 6 weeks ago. Reg set the page down. He kept his voice level. "How far along is the approval?" "It's sitting with me. I haven't moved it forward." Reg nodded slowly. "Keep it there." Pris said nothing. She was looking at him the way she sometimes did, carefully, with that particular stillness she had, when she was waiting to understand something fully before she spoke. He didn't offer her more than that. Not yet. She had done what he asked. She had been discreet. That was enough for now. "Thank you, Pris," he said. She took the page back, tucked it under her arm, and left him alone. He got home a little after 6. Camille's car was in the driveway. The lights in the kitchen were on. He could hear the shower running upstairs when he came through the front door. The faint rush of water through the pipes, the way it had always sounded in this house. He set his keys on the hook by the door and walked into the kitchen. The room smelled like something she'd reheated and left sitting. A pot on the stove, lid on, heat off. A half-empty glass of white wine on the counter, and her phone, face up near the edge of the island, charging from the short white cable she always kept in the kitchen. He wasn't trying to look at it. He walked to the stove and lifted the lid on the pot, checking what was inside. Rice and something. He set the lid back down. Then her phone lit up. He didn't move toward it. He just looked. From where he stood, it was maybe 4 feet away, and the notification was fully visible on the screen before it dimmed again. One line of preview text. "Can't wait for you to be my rich man officially. Director, money about to hit different." And above the text, a small circle. A contact photo. Reg walked to the counter slowly. He stood over the phone and looked at the photo. It was the same face. Slightly different angle than the HR picture, a little more relaxed, the smile a degree wider. But it was the same man. The same bright eyes. The same clean jaw. Deshawn Price, 29, regional account manager at Reg's own company, smiling up at him from his wife's phone screen. Reg stood there for 4 full seconds. Then he picked up his keys from the hook, went back out the front door, and sat in his truck in the driveway. He called Pris at 6:18. She answered on the second ring. "The HR photo," he said. "It's him." A pause. Short. "Reg, don't approve that promotion," he said. "Don't deny it either." He looked out through the windshield at the lit kitchen window, at the warm, ordinary glow of a house that had been lying to him for 8 months. "Just wait for my word." Pris was quiet for a moment. "Understood," she said. He ended the call. He sat in the truck a little longer. The porch light came on automatically, triggered by nothing, just the dark coming in. He sat with that too. 3 days passed. Reg woke up every morning at the same time, made coffee the same way, sat at the kitchen table and scrolled through his phone like a man with nothing on his mind. He asked Camille about her plans, listened when she answered, and said the right things back. She didn't notice anything different. That told him something too. At the office, he was focused, steady. He moved through meetings and calls without letting the weight of what he knew slow him down. But on Thursday afternoon, he stopped by Pris's office and leaned against the doorframe with his hands in his pockets. "Pull Deshawn Price's expense reports," he said. "Last 8 months. And his calendar activity, client meetings, travel, anything logged." Pris glanced up from her monitor. "Time frame?" "All of it. Everything since his start date." He kept his voice easy, unhurried. "I want to do a full audit before the promotion decision moves. Standard due diligence. I'll have it by end of day," she said. "No rush." He pushed off the doorframe. "Monday's fine." That was the whole conversation. At home, Camille was getting sloppy. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. It was hard to tell which was worse. Friday night, she sat across from him at the dinner table with her phone propped against her water glass, typing with one hand while she ate with the other. Reg cut his chicken and said nothing. The sound of the utensils on the plates was the loudest thing in the room. Then she laughed at something on her screen. Just a short, bright laugh. Private and involuntary, the kind you can't pull back fast enough. She pressed her lips together and looked down. Reg glanced up. "Something funny?" "Just something my coworker sent," she said, already setting the phone face down on the table. He took a sip of water. She picked up her fork again. He went back to his plate. Sunday afternoon, He was in the living room with a book he wasn't really reading when he heard Camille's voice carry down the hall from the back bedroom. The door wasn't fully closed. Her tone was bright, warm, the voice she used for people she was happy to talk to. He didn't move from the couch. "I'm telling you, he is just something else. Every time I see him, it's like—" A pause. Laughter. "Yes, yes, exactly." Reg turned a page he hadn't read. "I finally got myself a rich one." Her voice was full and satisfied, like she was tasting the words as they came out. "Only took 41 years." More laughter. Hers and her sister's, bleeding together through the phone, getting smaller as she moved further into the room. Reg set the book down on the armrest. He sat very still for a moment. Then he picked the book back up. Monday morning, the expense reports were on his desk when he arrived. Pris had printed them and stacked them in a plain manila folder with a yellow sticky note on top that said, "Per your request," in her clean, square handwriting. No name, no other notes. Just the folder, sitting there quietly. He took it home that night. He sat at his desk in the home office after Camille went to bed. After her phone stopped lighting up and the house went still, and he opened the folder under the desk lamp and started going through it page by page. Deshaun Price was careful, mostly. His expense reports were clean and consistent. Mileage reimbursements, the occasional client lunch, mid-range restaurants, reasonable totals. He filed on time. He documented well. On paper, he looked like exactly what his supervisor had called him. A disciplined, high-performing account manager who understood how to keep his numbers presentable. But there were 7 entries that didn't fit that pattern. 7 dinners, all charged to his corporate card. High-end restaurants, not the kind you took freight clients to. The kind you took someone you were trying to impress. Totals ranging from $340 to $820. Each entry was logged as a client dinner with a vague client name. Names that, when Reg cross-checked against the company's client roster, matched real accounts but showed no corresponding activity. No calls before, no notes after, no follow-up logged in the CRM, just the charge, just the amount, just the date. Reg pulled up the calendar on his phone and checked 3 of those dates against his own memory. The $400 dinner at Aurelius on a Thursday in September. Camille had come home that night smelling like something nice, telling him she'd grabbed dinner with a girlfriend. The $620 charge at the Monarch the following month. She'd said she wasn't hungry that night. Said she'd eaten at her sister's. The $820 charge from 2 weeks ago. The night she'd told him she had an early morning and was going to bed at 9:30. Reg set the report down on the desk. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose and sat there with his eyes closed. He had been paying for it. Every dinner, every bottle of wine, every table she'd sat across from Deshaun Price at, while she laughed at how little her husband understood about money. His money. He opened his eyes. He pulled the folder closer, picked up a pen, and began marking each entry with a small, neat circle. Wednesday afternoon, Reg pulled up to Jefferson High at 3:15 and put the truck in park. He watched the front doors through the windshield, hands loose on the steering wheel. The parking lot was loud with buses and car doors and the low roar of 100 conversations happening at once. Tanisha came through the front doors with her backpack over one shoulder and her earbuds half in, already pulling them out when she spotted the truck. She jogged over, pulled the door open, and dropped into the passenger seat. "Hey, Daddy." "Hey, baby. How was it?" "Long." She tossed her backpack into the back seat. "We had a sub in AP History who didn't know anything. Like, literally nothing. About what? About history." She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and he laughed a little, and just like that, the truck felt lighter. He pulled out of the lot and onto the main road. Tanisha connected her phone to the aux cord and started picking a song, scrolling slowly, not in any hurry. It was a comfortable kind of quiet between them. The kind that didn't need to be filled. They stopped at a red light. "Oh," Tanisha said, still scrolling. "Did Mom tell you I figured out who picked her up from the airport last month?" Reggie's hand didn't move on the wheel. "Which trip was that?" "The one when she went to see Aunt Denise. Remember? You were out of town for that work thing, and she asked me to get a ride home from Kayla's because she needed someone to pick her up from the airport." "Right," he said. Easy. Casual. I remember. I kept asking who was coming to get her. And she said, just a friend. But I was putting her luggage in the car and the friend was still there. And then, a few weeks later, I saw him at Walgreens. She introduced me. Tanisha glanced up from her phone. "His name's Deshawn. He works with her or something?" "I don't know. He seemed nice enough, I guess." The light turned green. Reg pressed the gas. "Deshawn," he repeated. His voice was even. Interested the right amount, not more. "I don't think she mentioned him. He's young." Tanisha wrinkled her nose a little. Not with any specific meaning, just a passing observation. Like, younger than her. Kinda dressed flashy. He glanced in the side mirror. "What did you think of him?" She shrugged. "I didn't really talk to him. He was just standing there by the car. Mom said bye pretty fast. She found a song and the first few notes filled the cab. "Can we stop at Chick-fil-A? I didn't eat lunch." "Yeah," Reg said. "We can stop." She turned the music up a little. Reg kept both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road. Inside, everything was very quiet. Camille had told him she spent that weekend at Denise's apartment, 40 minutes away, helping her sister recover from a minor outpatient procedure. He hadn't questioned it. He'd rearranged his own schedule to be home with Tanisha, stocked the fridge, told Camille to take her time. She had flown somewhere. She had come back on a flight. And Deshawn Price had been standing at the curb to pick her up. Reg sat across from Tanisha in a corner booth and ate a sandwich he barely tasted. She talked about her AP classes and a college visit she wanted to schedule, and a friend who was having a party he'd already agreed she could attend. He answered all of it. He asked the right follow-up question. He smiled at the right moments. His daughter did not notice a single thing wrong. He was getting good at that. That night, after Tanisha was upstairs and Camille had disappeared into the back bedroom with her phone, Reg sat at his desk and called Pris. She picked up on the second ring. "I need a PI," he said. "Someone discreet. Someone who knows how to pull travel records, hotel stays, that kind of thing. Not locally connected. A pause. Just a short one. I know someone. Used him twice for corporate work. He's clean and he's quiet. Can you send me his number tonight? Give me 10 minutes. The number came through in 8. The investigator's name was Carl Moten. He was ex-corporate security, mid-50s, and he spoke in short sentences that didn't waste anything. Reg laid out what he needed. Dates, names, travel history going back 8 months, and Moten listened without interrupting. 1 week, Moten said. Maybe less. It took 5 days. The file Moten delivered was clean and thorough. Printed pages, organized by date. Flight records, hotel confirmations, 3 trips across 8 months. Atlanta in February, Charleston in April, New Orleans just 6 weeks ago. All of them booked under Deshawn's name or a shared itinerary. All of them mapped directly on top of the dates Camille had told Reg she was at her sister's, helping Denise heal from her surgery. 3 trips, 8 months. 1 cover story, used again and again. Reg sat back and looked at the pages spread across his desk. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't impulse. It was a plan, built carefully, maintained deliberately, held together by her own sister's silence. He picked up the first page and read it again from the top. The call came on a Thursday morning, just after 8. Reg was sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and the Moten file open in front of him when his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the name on the screen and went still. Walter Boone. He hadn't seen that name on his phone in almost 4 years. Hadn't heard his brother's voice in longer than that. He let it ring once more. Then he picked up. Walter. Reggie. A pause. The kind that carried weight. I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from. You're in the top 5, Reg said, a short sound on the other end. Almost a laugh, but not quite. Fair enough. Another pause. I'm not calling to start anything up again. I want you to know that, before I say anything else. Reg leaned back in his chair. Then say what you called to say. Walter exhaled slowly. I've been hearing things. Around town, through people we both know. About Camille. He stopped. About a man she's been seeing. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. What kind of things? Reg asked. His voice gave nothing away. The kind where she's not being quiet about it anymore. She's been talking, Reg, to people, at events, wherever, calling this man her rich boyfriend, saying it like she's proud. Walter's voice dropped a little, like he was choosing his next words carefully. I didn't know if you knew. I didn't know if anyone had told you, but I couldn't just sit on it. Reg looked down at the Moten file. At the hotel, confirmation on top. Charleston, April. 2 guests. I appreciate the call, he said. I know we've got history, Walter said. I know I don't have the right to just walk back in and… Walter. Reg kept his voice even. I said, I appreciate the call. A longer pause this time. Then, quietly, Are you okay? I'm fine, Reg said. But I think we should meet. They met that afternoon at a park off Riverside Drive. Neutral ground. Walter was already sitting on a bench near the walking path when Reg arrived, hands folded, watching a pair of dogs drag their owner toward the water. He looked older. They both did, probably. But Walter wore it differently. Heavier, like something he was still carrying. He stood when he saw Reg coming, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Walter extended his hand. Reg looked at it for half a second. Then he shook it. They sat down, a foot of space between them, and neither man rushed to fill the silence. You look the same, Walter said finally. You look tired, Reg said. Walter huffed out a breath. Yeah, well, he rubbed the back of his neck. I manage a restaurant now, over on Clement Street. Harlow's. You know it? Reg shook his head. It's nice, quiet. Mostly business dinners, private events, that kind of thing. Walter paused. Which is actually, that's part of why I called. Reg turned to look at him. Walter kept his eyes on the path ahead. About 6 weeks ago, I had a reservation come, party of 2, private table in the back room. Woman comes in, younger man. They're comfortable together. Real comfortable. He stopped. It was Camille. Reg said nothing. She didn't see me. I was working the floor in the back and they were already seated by the time I came through. I almost went over, figured she'd introduce me as your brother, make it awkward. He shook his head. But the way they were sitting together, I knew right then it wasn't anything I should interrupt. What did you hear? Reg asked. Walter finally turned to look at him. His jaw was tight. They were talking about moving in together. She kept saying, once things open up. He was talking about his promotion, some director position at his job. Said the money was going to change everything, that they'd finally be able to make a real move. Walter paused. She was excited, Reg. She was sitting there making plans, like it was all settled. Reg stared at the water at the far end of the park. It was flat and gray under the afternoon clouds. Still, Camille's whole plan, her whole future, the apartment, the move, the new life she'd been quietly building for 8 months, all of it balanced on one thing, a promotion, a title, a salary bump that hadn't happened yet, a promotion that lived in a file on Reggie's own desk, waiting for his signature. She didn't know that. Deshawn didn't know that. Neither of them had any idea that the man holding the pen was the same man she'd been laughing at for years. Reg let out a slow breath through his nose. How long have you been sitting on this? He asked. 3 weeks, Walter said. I almost called a dozen times. Why didn't you? Walter was quiet for a moment, because I didn't know if I had the right. After everything. He looked down at his hands. But this felt like something I couldn't keep to myself. Reg nodded slowly. He looked out at the water one more time. Then he turned back to his brother. "I need your help finishing this the right way," he said. "You in?" The next morning, Pris had coffee waiting. 3 cups. 3 chairs pulled up around the small conference table in Reg's private office. The one with no windows facing the main floor. The one where the door locked from the inside. She'd closed the blinds before either of them arrived. Walter looked around the room when he walked in. He took in the clean lines of the space, the quiet hum of the building, the weight of something real and carefully built pressing against every surface. "You did all this," he said quietly. Not a question. 6 years, Reg said. "Sit down." Pris set a folder on the table and folded her hands over it. She looked at Walter with the steady, measuring kind of eye contact that had made more than one person squirm in that chair. Walter didn't squirm. He just nodded, like he understood he was being sized up and accepted the terms. "Everything we discuss in this room stays in this room," Pris said. "Understood," Walter said. She opened the folder. The plan was clean. That was the thing about Pris. She didn't build messy plans. She built structures, tight, load-bearing, with every piece in its right place. Meridian had been quietly considering a leadership dinner for months, ostensibly tied to the director promotions that were overdue for formal announcement. That part was real. 3 other regional managers were in line for new titles, and the executive team had already been expecting some kind of event. The dinner wouldn't look unusual to anyone inside the company. Reg would send out formal invitations to the full leadership team. Dinner, private venue, acknowledgement of the company's growth. And at the top of each invitation, under the Meridian letterhead that nobody had ever looked twice at, his full name, Reginald Ashford, founder and chief executive officer, Ashford Meridian Group. For most of his employees, it would be the first time they'd seen that name attached to a title. For Deshawn Price, it would be something else entirely. "Spouses are included?" Walter asked. "Spouses are encouraged," Pris said. "It's that kind of event." She looked at Reg. "Camille will receive a personal invitation, addressed to her directly, as a supportive spouse." Reg nodded once. Walter leaned back slowly. "And she won't suspect anything." "She'll think Reg is trying to impress her," Pris said. "She'll probably be annoyed she has to go." The 3 of them sat with that for a moment. "What about Deshawn's termination?" Walter asked. "How does that get handled without it turning into a lawsuit?" Pris tapped the folder. His expense reports show personal entertainment charged to a corporate account. 3 meals, 1 hotel night in Charleston, documented, itemized, matched to dates. That's a clear violation of company policy. Her voice was flat and professional, the way it always got when she was reading from something she knew cold. "The employment termination is clean. Legal signed off on it already." "They don't know why," Reg said. "Just that we needed a policy review before the promotion decision." Walter nodded slowly. "And the divorce?" Reg picked up his cup. "That's already moving." He'd gone to see his attorney, Carol Veach, on Wednesday afternoon, driving himself in the plain gray truck he kept for days when he didn't want to be noticed. Carol's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, overlooking a street full of people who never looked up. She'd had the prenuptial agreement pulled before he sat down. "It's airtight," she said, setting it on the desk between them. "Meridian and all affiliated holdings are excluded from the marital estate." She signed this before the wedding, Reg. "It's notarized, witnessed, and has survived 2 state-level reviews since." She looked at him steadily. "She gets nothing tied to the business." "And the personal accounts?" "We split what's joint. That's standard." Carol opened a second file. "But given the evidence of financial deception, trips, expenditures, the documented use of marital resources to facilitate the affair, we have grounds to argue dissipation of marital assets." That changes the math considerably in your favor. Reg looked at the prenup. 14 years old. He remembered the morning Camille had signed it, rolling her eyes, saying it was just a formality, saying of course it didn't matter because they were going to be together forever. He remembered she'd laughed about it. File it, he said. Carol nodded and reached for her pen. The invitations went out on Friday. Cream paper, Meridian letterhead, his full name printed cleanly at the top. Pris handled the distribution herself, walking each sealed envelope to the outgoing courier before the end of business. Deshawn Price's invitation went into the stack with everyone else's, no different, no special handling. Camille's came by mail, a heavier envelope, slightly more formal. Inside, a handwritten note from Reg. I'd love for you to be there. That evening, Reg sat at the conference table with Pris and Walter on either side of him. The case file was open in the center of the table. Pris had organized it in clean sections with small white tabs. Financial records, expense reports, trip confirmations, PI documentation, legal filings. Reg turned through each section slowly. He didn't rush. He read every page like he was seeing it for the first time, even though he'd read most of it before, because he wanted to be sure. Completely, absolutely sure. Walter sat quietly to his left, hands flat on the table. Pris sat to his right, watching him without speaking. When Reg reached the last page, he closed the folder. He looked at the date written at the top of Pris's summary sheet. 2 weeks out. A Saturday evening. He set his hand on top of the folder and left it there. The venue was called the Meridian Room. Pris had chosen it on purpose. It sat on the top floor of a converted warehouse on the east side of the city. All exposed brick and warm light. Long oak tables and high ceilings. The kind of place that said serious money without trying too hard. The kind of place where announcements felt permanent. Camille walked in at 7:15, 12 minutes late, wearing a deep burgundy dress that she'd bought the week before without telling Reg. Her hair was done. Her earrings were new. She looked like a woman who had somewhere better to be and was tolerating this as a courtesy. She scanned the room the moment she crossed the threshold. Reg watched her do it. He was standing near the far end of the main table, talking quietly with one of his regional directors, a steady-handed woman named Marcus from the Memphis office. He held a glass of water. He wore a dark suit, no tie, his posture easy and unhurried. He looked the same way he always looked, like a man with nothing to prove. Camille's eyes moved across the room in one long sweep. She clocked the table settings, the staff, the group of executives near the bar. She found Deshawn almost immediately. He was seated mid-table, dressed sharp in a charcoal blazer, talking to the man beside him with the easy, practiced energy of someone who believed tonight was already his. He looked good. Reg could see that plainly. Young and well-dressed and confident in a way that came from never having been truly wrong about anything yet. Deshawn had not seen Camille come in. He was still talking, gesturing with one hand, smiling at something the man beside him had said. Camille let out a small breath. The tension in her shoulders eased, just slightly. She found Reg next. Her eyes landed on him the way they always did now. Brief, functional. She crossed the room toward him, kissed him on the cheek without warmth, and said, "This is nice, I guess. Very corporate." "Glad you came," Reg said. She looked around again. "Which one is getting the big promotion?" "We'll get to that," he said. She accepted a glass of wine from a passing server and drifted toward the end of the table, settling into the chair marked with her name card. She was seated 3 places down from Deshawn, with 2 other spouses between them, close enough to watch, far enough to be proper about it. Reg returned to his conversation. He did not look at her again. Dinner moved the way Pris had planned it. Courses came and went. The room filled with the low hum of a successful professional gathering, conversations about contracts, about regional targets, about Q4. Deshawn held court easily, laughing a little too loud at the right moments, playing the part of a man ascending. He had not yet looked at Reg closely enough to recognize him from anywhere. Why would he? The man sitting at the head of the table had been introduced only as a guest. A quiet presence. Someone's plus one, maybe. Nobody had said otherwise. Camille ate slowly, watching Deshawn from the corner of her eye. Reg could see the small, private satisfaction working at the edges of her expression, the way she held her wine glass like someone toasting herself in her own head. When the plates were cleared, Pris stood. She moved to the head of the table without hurry, buttoning her jacket once, setting both hands lightly on the back of the chair in front of her. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said. Her voice carried easily. "Meridian has had a remarkable run this year. Contracts up, retention up, 3 regions outperforming projection. That's not an accident. That's the result of the people in this room." Polite applause. Pris let it settle. "Before we get to the formal announcements," she said, "I want to take a moment to properly introduce someone who should have been introduced to this group a long time ago." She paused. Not for effect, just because she meant it. This company was built by one person. One vision, one set of hands, 6 years of work before most of you ever signed on. And he has let the work speak for itself, which is consistent with everything you'll learn about him once you know who he is. She looked toward the head of the table, Reginald Ashford, founder and chief executive officer of Meridian Ops Solutions and its parent company, Ashford Meridian Group. Reg stood. The room responded with applause, the genuine kind that comes from surprise. And then it slowed, and then it stopped, because people were looking at him and beginning to understand that the man standing at the head of the table was not a guest, had never been a guest, and that everything they thought they knew about tonight had just shifted. Camille's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. The color left her face in a single, quiet moment. Not dramatic, not a gasp, just a slow, awful draining, like the lights being turned down in a room where someone has just said something that cannot be unsaid. Deshawn turned to look at Reg. Really look. His eyes moved from Reg's face to Pris, to the engraved nameplate at the head of the table. Reginald Ashford, CEO. His jaw went slack. The room was very still. The silence held for 3 full seconds. Reg let it. Then he set his water glass down, smoothed the front of his jacket once, and looked directly at Deshawn. "Mr. Price." His voice was calm, conversational even, like a man reading from a grocery list. Deshawn straightened, some reflex, some leftover instinct to perform competence in front of authority. "Sir, No," Reg said. Quiet, flat. "Not yet." Deshawn closed his mouth. Reg reached down and placed a single manila folder on the table in front of him. He did not open it. He didn't need to. "You were submitted for consideration for the regional director position 6 weeks ago. I've reviewed that submission carefully." He paused. "The promotion is denied." A murmur moved through the room, barely audible. The kind of sound people make when they understand something bad is happening, and don't yet know how bad. Reg continued. "Over the past 8 months, your corporate card has been used to cover 14 separate restaurant charges, combined total of just over $4,000. Those charges were logged as client entertainment." He glanced at the folder. "They were not client entertainment. They were personal dinners with a colleague's spouse." The word colleague landed like a stone dropped into still water. Every head in the room turned, almost involuntarily, toward Camille. She had not moved. Her wine glass was still suspended in the air, still frozen at that same impossible angle, as though her hand had forgotten what it was doing. Deshawn's face had gone a strange, mottled color. He looked at Reg, then at the folder, then at his own hands, flat on the table in front of him. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. He knew it. The whole room knew it. Your employment with Meridian Ops Solutions is terminated. Effective tonight. Reggie's voice did not rise. It did not sharpen or harden. It stayed exactly where it had started. Steady and final. HR will follow up with documentation of your severance terms. You're welcome to finish your meal. He picked up his water glass again. Deshawn pushed back from the table. He stood, and the legs of his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. And that sound was the loudest thing in the room. He did not look at Camille. He walked toward the exit with his hands at his sides and his jaw locked tight. And no one called after him, and no one spoke. And the only sound was his footsteps crossing the floor until the door to the stairwell closed behind him. The room exhaled. Reg looked around the table once, unhurried, making brief eye contact with a few of the people he trusted most. Then he turned to Pris. She gave him one small nod. "We'll take a short break," Reg said. 10 minutes. Then Pris will walk everyone through the rest of tonight's announcements. He looked at Camille. Camille. He said it the same way he'd said Deshawn's name. Not cold, not angry, just clear. "Come with me, please." The adjoining room was small and quiet. A private dining space reserved for exactly this. A round table, 4 chairs, a window overlooking the dark city below. Pris had arranged it. 1 lamp burning low. 2 glasses of water, untouched. Camille walked in ahead of him. She turned when she heard the door close. She looked different now. The confidence she'd worn into the room like a second dress had gone somewhere. What was left was smaller, more careful. "Reg, sit down," he said. She sat. He didn't. He stood near the window with his hands clasped in front of him, and he let the room be quiet for a moment, because he had earned that quiet, and she could wait. "The trips," he said. 6 of them over 8 months, not 4, which is what the investigator confirmed first. 6. Savannah, Charleston, Atlanta twice. The beach house in Gulf Shores. He watched her face. "You told me you were helping your sister recover from surgery. She was covering for you, which means she knew. The whole time." Camille's lips pressed together. "The corporate card." He said it simply. "The dinners he took you to, the ones he bragged about. I paid for them, Camille. My company paid for them. Every single one." A muscle in her jaw moved. Divorce papers were filed 4 days ago. He reached inside his jacket and set a folded document on the table in front of her. Not aggressively, just placed it there. The way you'd place a receipt after a transaction is complete. The prenup holds. The business is fully protected. You'll receive what the agreement specifies, and nothing more. She stared at the document. She didn't pick it up. The silence stretched. Reg looked at her for a long moment. At the burgundy dress she'd bought without telling him. At the earrings he didn't recognize. At the woman who had sat across a dinner table from him for 14 years and seen someone smaller than he was. "You wanted a rich man, Camille." His voice was even. No heat in it. No satisfaction either. Just the plain, clear weight of a true thing being said out loud. "You were married to one the whole time. You just never bothered to look." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. "Take all the time you need in here. There's water on the table." He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped back into the noise of the room beyond, leaving her alone in the quiet with the document and the low lamp and the city dark below the window. She didn't follow him out for a long time. When she finally did, she walked straight through the main room without stopping, without looking at anyone, her heels quiet against the hardwood floor. She passed the table where Deshawn had been sitting. She did not look at his empty chair. She pushed through the exit door, and she was gone. A year is a quiet thing when you let it be. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hand you a certificate or shake your hand. It just moves, one day folding into the next, until you look up one morning and realize the person standing in your kitchen feels different from the person who stood there 12 months ago. Reg noticed it for the first time on a Tuesday in March. He was at his desk on the 14th floor of Meridian's new downtown office, reading through the final prospectus documents before they went to print. The city spread out behind him through a wall of glass. Gray sky, slow traffic, a crane swinging steel somewhere 3 blocks east. He had a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow. His reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead. His phone buzzed. It was Tanisha. A photo. She'd taken it from the lobby downstairs, pointing her camera up at the building directory sign just inside the front entrance. Right there on the glass panel, in clean white letters, Ashford Meridian Group, floors 12 to 15. Underneath, she had typed, "That's my dad's building." No exclamation points, just that. Said plainly, the way she said everything that mattered most. Reg stared at it for a moment. Then he set the phone face down on the desk, took his glasses off, and sat back in his chair. He let himself feel it, just for a minute. The IPO had been deliberate and modest, targeted like everything else he built. No splashy press release, no cable news segment, no morning show appearance with a practiced smile. Just the right investors, the right advisors, and a clean filing that reflected what the company had actually been worth for the past 3 years. The valuation that came back made Pris laugh out loud when she read it. Not because it surprised her, but because she had been looking at those numbers for years, and the rest of the world was only now catching up. Word traveled. It always did. His name started showing up in local business journals, then regional ones. A reporter from a trade magazine asked for 15 minutes and walked out an hour later with more than she'd planned to write. A university invited him to speak to a room full of young entrepreneurs, mostly kids in their 20s with ideas too big for their bank accounts. He said yes. He went back twice more after that. He didn't become someone different. He just became more visible as exactly who he had always been. Walter's office was on the 13th floor, 2 doors down from the conference room. It was not a gift. Nothing about it was charity, and both men understood that without saying so. Walter had come back in with a clear scope: operations and vendor relationship, the part of the business he knew best and had genuinely been good at before everything fell apart between them. He had a title that matched his actual role. He had accountability. He had earned his way back in, and the work showed it. They still didn't talk much about the years in between. Neither of them needed to. Some things got resolved not by being discussed, but by being replaced, slowly, steadily, with new things that were better. Tanisha had made her choice in September, 3 weeks before the school year started. She sat down with Reg at the kitchen table one evening and told him she wanted to live with him full-time. She said it the same way she said everything, directly, without drama, meeting his eyes. "I'm not mad at Mom," she said. "I just want to be here." Reg had nodded. He didn't push for more than that, and she didn't offer it. They sat at the table for a while after, eating the rest of dinner, and the conversation moved on to other things. Her AP classes, a book she was reading, a college she was starting to think about. That was enough. More than enough. The restaurant was small and deliberately chosen. No private room, no reserved section, no long guest list. Just a good table near the window, the kind of place where the food was worth talking about. And the noise was low enough that you could actually hear the people across from you. Pris arrived first. Then Walter, who was already in a good mood about something to do with a vendor contract he'd closed that afternoon. Then Tanisha, who had come straight from a study group and still had her backpack, which she dropped under her chair without apology. Reg ordered for the table. They ate, they talked. Walter told a story about a shipping vendor from Decatur who had tried to renegotiate a rate 3 times in 1 week. Tanisha laughed. Pris corrected one detail of the story, and Walter pointed at her and said, "Exactly right. I forgot that part." At some point, Reg thought about Camille. He had heard, through no particular effort, that she was working at a clothing boutique in a part of town she would have once considered beneath her. alone. Her social circle had contracted sharply. Once people she thought were her friends realized the version of her story they'd been told was missing a few details. He didn't feel satisfied by that. He didn't feel much about it at all. Deshawn was gone, out of state, out of the industry. His name a cautionary footnote in a story that most people in the building had already moved on from. Reg reached for his glass. "To the company," Walter said, raising his. "To the company," Pris agreed. Tanisha lifted her water glass and looked at her father. Reg looked around the table, at his brother, back where he belonged, at Pris, who had known the truth long before anyone else and had never once used it carelessly, at his daughter, who had chosen him. "Not to the company," he said. He kept his voice easy. "To finally being seen." He raised his glass. They met his. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.